You are watching episode 3 of The Insurance Podcast. Hey guys, episode 3, welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning back into The Insurance Podcast. My name is Brad Dawson. If this is the first time you've tuned into the podcast, thank you. It's called The Insurance Podcast. We're here to specifically discuss all things insurance in Australia and internationally as well. Thanks for watching. There's a few things I wanted to talk to about in today's episode 3, but before we get into the couple of topics I want to talk about, I wanted to ask if maybe you guys could help us out and perhaps like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you want to keep up with our what's happening, you can follow us along with our social media, which is Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Soundcloud. This is just how you keep up with which episodes is coming up next, when they're dropping, who we're meeting with, who we're visiting, who's visiting us. So those ads are: Instagram is @TheInsurancePodcast, Facebook is @TheInsurancePodcast Australia, and YouTube, if you just search for The Insurance Podcast, you'll find our stuff on there now. So this is episode 3. SoundCloud, if you're a SoundCloud user, the exact same video type you may be watching now or listening to now is uploaded the audio file onto SoundCloud, so you can hear that at soundcloud.com/TheInsurancePodcast. Thank you so much everyone for your support. It's very much appreciated as we release more content to you. I hope everyone's well and happy. I know I'm happy this week. Bit of sunshine, bit of rain, everyone's happy. Coming off the Easter break, we're always going to have rain over Easter, unless you're in Condobolin or somewhere, you poor buggers, where you don't have any rain. Coming off our last episode, I got some, well actually it's my fault, I asked for some feedback, I got it. I got emails, I got some messages on Facebook and Instagram from colleagues, from friends, from clients, and some new people that I haven't spoken to before, but they're happy to provide me with some feedback. The use of my word and I apologize for my efforts or lack of efforts in my last video, and I apologize in advance for this one that you're watching now. I'll do my very best to keep my ums and ahs down to a minimum. If it does get ugly and there's too many of them, I might do a little running count up here with how many there we go, I've already done one. Yeah, may as well start a running count now of how many times I say and ah. I'll do my very best. I'll be accountable to you guys. I will try so hard not to say them. There we go, we're already away. So, like I said, they get a little out of hand in the last one. It looks like it's going to do the same in this one. What I want to discuss in this week's episode 3 was to discuss the recent fires at Notre Dame Cathedral in France. Awful. It's not fun for anybody. No one would have enjoyed watching that on the news or on the telly or all over Facebook, Instagram. It was terrible. The damage you saw, it was like a movie. It was like watching Independence Day when I was a kid, when you sort of see that White House just go boom and the fire run through it. It's terrible, but it's real. It happened. It's awful. The building itself is pretty heavily damaged. If you don't already know, if you would have obviously been caught up with it. If not, I'll give you a brief overview of what happened. The building itself, the cathedral, is 856 years old. 856 years old. If you're an Australian watching this, that is like unheard of in the age of a building. I mean, early 1600s was when, 1606 I think was when that, I can't remember his name now, William Jantz, I think, in early 1600, sort of discovered Australia in itself. And then Abel Tasman was not long after that, and then Captain Cook in 1770. So we're talking 250 years since that happened. This is 856 years ago this beautiful structure was built. So if you're an international viewer, this probably isn't such a big deal to you, but if you live in Australia, to hear of a building or a structure or anything of that age is absolutely unreal. So awful. Unless you're working for Lloyd's of London or you've dealt with Lloyd's of London, a building of that age is untoward. You haven't heard of it before. I certainly haven't seen many of them unless I've travelled overseas. So anyway, back to the story. Apparently the French police have done some inquiries and it looks like the fire was likely started by an electrical short circuit. To where that was happening, I'm not sure. But following the fire, there's been a lot of discussion around the damage, the potential costs in relation to rebuilding the 856-year-old cathedral. It's not good. So briefly go back a step. The cathedral was apparently undergoing some restorations at the time. There was 2 construction companies that were involved with some form of restoration. I'm not going to pretend I know how much involved they were with restoration work, but all I understand is they were doing some form of restoration work. Some of the artworks I think that they had in the building were actually insured by a company called AXA. Other than that, the building wasn't insured. So when someone doesn't insure their own building, if someone doesn't source out the insurance for their building from an insurer, that's deemed to be self-insured. So I assume the French state were probably insuring themselves, so self-insuring their own building. Also, I can't imagine that it's terribly easy to get insurance on a building like that, with so worldly known and so heavily worked on for such delicate work some 850 years ago. InsuranceBusinessMag.com covered this in a recent article, which was a good read. I'll put a link to it below if you guys would like to have a read of it. I usually try and reference all of my work at the bottom of my videos, so if I don't mention it, just have a look anyway, you'll likely find it there. So here's where it gets a bit interesting. You remember those couple of contractors that I mentioned that were on site at the time? With the fire apparently started, they were doing work at least around the similar time. I understand the fire happened, it was like the 15th or 16th of April. I think it was after hours that it happened. Now those companies, like I said, I'm not going to attempt at their names, French names. I'm not a linguist French-wise, so I'm not going to talk about them. You remember those contractors I mentioned earlier, the ones that I was mentioning a second ago, the French ones, I'm not going to try out their name, the ones that were arranging the restorations at the time. Apparently their own civil liability insurances were taken out by the same insurer that was insuring the artwork, AXA. AXA have been approached and they've provided a couple of statements, one of which the cause of the fire is currently under investigation, and then all AXA team members are going to be fully cooperating with the state services to aid in the process. So there might be some other parties, it's just surmising here, there might be potentially subject to subrogation. There's going to be a huge investigation into this fire, and these guys have hopefully this liability insurance, and if they are found proportionately responsible, then hopefully they've got some sort of cover that'll extend to what they were doing there. If the investigators find anything other than what the French police referred to as the fire was likely started by electrical short circuit, we'll just have to watch out for this as it unfolds, I suppose. In light of what I just mentioned, the French state, and this is sort of what really blew up in the media, the French state announced it'd be donating 40 million euro to rebuild the cathedral. Sounds like a big number, but when you think about such an old, beautiful building and it being basically completely destroyed and having so many people, that know of this building, I doubt that 40 million euro is probably going to get there. Such an impressive structure, 40 million euro. And it's a lot of money. We're not discounting that, but it's just a lot of the way to go, and it's not a lot of way to get there. 40 million. Fortunately, I think within like 24 hours, they raised. When I say they, I should clarify. Billionaires, corporations, citizens, philanthropists, whomever, have collectively with GoFundMe type accounts or online or through charities raised 1 billion euro. So in Aussie dollary dues, that's 1.6 billion, I think, 1.6 billion dollary dues in Australia. So that's awesome. The fact that everyone can come together and recognise that this beautiful building was perhaps uninsurable because of its magnitude, that the global populations come together in such a short space of time and probably be able to get this thing rebuilt. The only thing I'd hope that would happen is that they'd set up some sort of body or some sort of, broad form sort of trust where there's board members and people that are invested that can assist and make sure that this money is spent on the entire construction process and not on the wrong things. So I guess I could say that the honest way it could be spent on it, and not have companies sort of taking too much. So I'm sure they'll appoint bodies to do that. But yeah, it's interesting as that sort of unfolded. Difficult to fathom that number in my head. I mean, like 1.6 billion Australian dollars. But anyway, they've raised it and it's fantastic. So that's probably it of our podcast today, episode 3. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email us at TheInsurancePodcast@outlook.com. I hope that I've kept my ums and ahs to a minimum. We'll wait and see as that unfolds and I rewatch what I've written to what I've said today. Like I said before, there's a couple of articles I've referred to in the podcast. I'll put them at the bottom of the video. Also, I'll put links to our social media if you'd like to follow along, including our Soundcloud, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, if you want to follow along. So thank you once again to everybody for watching again today. Your support is much appreciated. Hope you all have a great week and all the best. Cheers. Thanks, guys.